Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randirhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
The committee will make decisions about the makeup of the hearing, but she's been asking for the opportunity to be heard, and she's going to be given the opportunity to be heard on Monday.
This is not a man that deserves this. This should have been brought to the fore. It should have been brought up long ago.
Judge Kavanaugh is anxious to do it. I don't know about the other party.
I'm going to look at what she said about Brett Kavanaugh in high school and compare that to everything else I know about Brett Kavanaugh, including his denial, and I'll make a decision.
You believe him?
Yeah, I sure do.
Do you believe the accusers at all or not?
Well, I think she's mistaken.
This has been really a drive-by attack on the character of this judge.
Is there really enough evidence here, given the nature of the allegation, how old it is, and the uncertain nature of it, to deny this man who's lived an incredible life a promotion to the Supreme Court?
I don't have enough firsthand information. I just have media reports. And while I trust our media, I'd prefer to go to the original source on something that's important.
Those Democratic senators had no interest in the mountain of evidence about Judge Kavanaugh's character integrity. They had no interest in that whatsoever.
In the last-minute effort by the Democrats to stall the vote, to basically try to smear Judge Kavanaugh's reputation. I worked with him when I was single, when he was single. We worked very closely together, hour after hour, on important issues related to the Bush administration, and he was a perfect gentleman.
What about Judge Kavanaugh? This is trying to ruin his life here.
He is such an outstanding man. Very hard for me to imagine that anything happened.
Yeah, he's an outstanding man unless you apply the polygraph with a rape-o-meter, and then, you know, not so great. Listen, here's the thing. This man has testified under oath falsely before about stolen emails. Nobody has asked him about his finances. And then in the written questions, Sheldon Whitehouse, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, asked him about these finances of his. The man makes, just so you know, he makes $220,000 a year. He bought a house at $1.2 million. How does that happen? His financial disclosures do not show that he would even have had enough money for the down payment on a $1.25 million house. He was also not only a clerk to the Chief Justice of the Ninth Circuit, Mr. Judge Kozinski, who for 10 years had been accused of sexual harassment and forcing clerks, female clerks, to watch porn with him in order to keep their jobs, same as Anita Hale testified about Clarence Thomas. And he's also friends with this guy, Mark Judge, who is a sick freaking loon, who's a blackout alcoholic, who writes books about being a blackout alcoholic. And now we find out today that, well, we found out a bunch of things. I'll tell you about the scheduling, because here you have the Republicans saying, this is her chance. We're giving her, you know, Monday, and she better tell us by 10 a.m. tomorrow, this is her chance, or else we're putting this man who's lied about stolen emails, who's lied about his finances, who's lied about a cover-up with another judge who was removed from the court after a 10-year fight to get him off the court. 10 years, that's what it takes to get somebody off the court for lesser behavior than what Dr. Ford says happened to her with Brett Kavanaugh, and she puts a witness in the room. Now, no one would put a witness in the room if they were making up a story. No one would do that. If you were going to make up a story, why would you include a witness? Makes no sense, right? Okay. But Mark Judge is a sick loon, obviously, and she puts him in the room. And the Republicans say there's no need to call witnesses. There's just no need. Don't have to. And the same thing happened with Anita Hill. And these were lesser charges. Remember, Anita Hill and Kozinski. Anita Hill was saying that Clarence Thomas was threatening to withhold important assignments unless she went out with him. And by that, she took it to mean watch porn with him. He talked about the size of his penis. And Long Dong Silver was a man in a movie. That was the name of the movie. And there were witnesses that they could have called. He apparently went to a porn shop right near his house called Graffitis. And the clerk at the porn shop knew that Clarence Thomas was a regular there and was renting freaking porn movies all the time. Subsequently, all these years later, the woman who was dating Clarence Thomas, who was also a judge, she actually said, well, now I'm retiring. I don't have to worry about him. I don't have to fear for my life. I did look back. Yes, we had threesomes. And yes, he would look for women at work to join our threesomes. And I didn't want to tell anybody because I would look bad and maybe I wouldn't. My career would have been disturbed too. That's Lillian McEwen.
We had a relationship that included threesomes. And he recruited women that he worked with for participation in those threesomes.
Lillian McEwen is a retired federal prosecutor.
Great. A retired federal prosecutor was having threesomes with now a 27 years this perv is sitting on the court. I mean, this is unbelievable. Kaczynski, same thing, was watch porn with me, and what's crazy is Kavanaugh clerked for Kozinski. There is no way Kavanaugh did not know about Kozinski. There are emails between Kozinski and Kavanaugh. There was an email list where Kozinski would email people in this special club these really filthy, dirty clips and jokes and all kinds of porn. Brett Kavanaugh was a recipient of that. He denied under oath to Mazie Hirono that he, ever remembered receiving or being part of any of that. But now, all of a sudden, we have an attorney. We have an attorney named Cyrus Sinai. Cyrus Sinai made his first attempt to reach out to Senator Charles Grassley and Dianne Feinstein back in July as well. July 24th, Mr. Sinai, he's an attorney who he has information relevant to the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. He said that he has a letter. Well, he actually does have a letter. He claimed in his letter that multiple employees of the federal judiciary are willing to speak to investigators about Brett Kavanaugh. He told the Chuck Grassley, and he also copied Dianne Feinstein. In fact, he hand-delivered this letter on July 24th to Senator Feinstein's California office, and he also sent this to Charles Grassley. He told Charles Grassley and Feinstein, quote, "There are persons who work for or who have worked for the federal judiciary who have important stories to tell about disgraced former Chief Judge Alex Kozinski and his mentee, current United States Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. I know that there are people who wish to speak out but fear retaliation because I have been contacted by more than a half a dozen such persons since Judge Kozinski resigned in disgrace." Who is this man, Cyrus Sinai? He is the original whistleblower against Kozinski. Years before these articles about Kozinski's pervy nature were in the Washington Post, years before, he pointed at Kozinski and said that this guy was doing exactly what he was removed for doing. And nobody would take him seriously. In fact, the entire court, the entire apparatus of attorneys and clerks and everything else, they tried to prosecute him. They literally tried to prosecute him. And they were almost successful, except that a appeals court overturned it. But this guy's been trying to tell the truth for so long. So he's a California attorney. He blew the whistle on Kozinski years before there were a series of articles about Kozinski in the Washington Post in December. And it finally brought about the resignation of the chief judge of the Ninth Circuit, Mr. Kozinski. over sexual harassment revelations. Now, Mr. Sinai has challenged the judiciary, and he was deemed this is unbelievable, a vexatious litigant, meaning he just brings lawsuits. That's what he does. He just likes to file. And a trial court attempted to label him as that, to discredit him, and he fought through it. And on appeal, being a vexatious litigant was overturned. And so, he was able to, continue. And so now, all these years later, Kozinski resigns, and questions have now been raised about what Kavanaugh knew, or what did Kavanaugh do when he had to have known about this kind of behavior, because he had a very close relationship with Kozinski. Kavanaugh clerked for Kozinski in the 90s, which led to his clerkship because Kozinski is the person who recommended Kavanaugh to Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, who Kavanaugh ended up clerking for. And then Kennedy recommended Kavanaugh to Trump as a replacement for himself. Kozinski and Kavanaugh are still friends, and they vetted all these clerks for Kozinski over the years. They vetted lots and lots and lots of clerks. And now we find out that Kozinski's son ended up clerking for Kavanaugh recently. So here's the story of the letter. The Sinai letter was overnighted and emailed to Grassley's office on July 25th. Sinai provided a copy of the receipt. He dropped the letter off by hand at Dianne Feinstein's office in West Los Angeles, he said, after being told over the phone that was the most efficient route to delivery. Grassley's spokesman provided the following statement to The Intercept. This is who broke this story. Senator Grassley's office received correspondence, which was also addressed to Senator Feinstein, from Mr. Sinai in July. As we always do, the office reviewed the content and claims in the letter to determine how best to assess and use the information. The contents of the letter concerned the action and behavior of former Judge Alex Kozinski and, to a lesser extent, his relationship with Judge Kavanaugh. This topic was discussed significantly at Judge Kavanaugh's hearing. Yeah, that's true. Mazie Hirono asked him about it. Mazie Hirono asked him all about it, because if Kavanaugh did know, he lied under oath. If Kavanaugh didn't know, then he's the least observant person anywhere near Justice Kozinski, and he doesn't deserve to be elevated to the Supreme Court. Here, this is long, but this is Mazie Hirono's questioning of Brett Kavanaugh on this matter.
Judge Kavanaugh, Chief Justice John Roberts has recognized that, quote, the judicial branch is not immune, end quote, from the widespread problem of sexual harassment and assault, and has taken steps to address this issue. As part of my responsibility as a member of this committee to ensure the fitness of nominees for a lifetime appointment to the federal bench, I ask each nominee 2 questions. First question for you. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
I started asking these questions about sexual harassment because it's so hard to hold lifetime appointees to the federal bench accountable, and because I did not want the Me Too movement to be swept under the rug. While Senator Hatch asked you some questions about this, I have some additional questions for you. Last December, 15 brave women came forward and shared their stories of sexual harassment and assault by former Judge Alex Kozinski. Some of them are detailed on the chart behind me.
A chart. Look, everybody, there's a chart of 15 women.
Very explicit allegations of sexual harassment and assault. Mm-hmm. We know from the reporting that Judge Kozinski's behavior was egregious and pervasive. It went on for more than 30 years. Jesus. It affected law clerks, professors, law students, lawyers, and in at least one case, even another federal judge. And those are just the women who came forward. Judge Kozinski's behavior became so notorious that professors began to warn female students not to apply for clerkships with them. Judge Kozinski's behavior in this regard was an open secret. A short time after Judge Kozinski's accusers went public, the judge abruptly resigned, which effectively shut down the federal investigation into his misconduct. I do not think this was a coincidence. In 2008, in connection with another investigation into Judge Kozinski, the LA Times wrote a story about something called the Easy Rider Gag List, an email group that the judge used to send what the Times reported was, quote, a steady diet of tasteless humor, end quote. The report describes the list as made up of friends and associates, including his law clerks, colleagues on the federal bench, prominent attorneys, and journalists. Senator Hatch asked you if you were on this Easy Rider gag list, where Judge Kozinski would send inappropriate materials. Your response was that you don't remember anything like that. Are you telling us that you may have received a steady diet of what people on the list have described as, quote, a lot of vulgar jokes, very dirty jokes, but you don't remember it?
No, I don't remember anything like that.
I don't remember.
And I'm not.
Oh, the answer is no. Have you ever?
If I could elaborate.
I think that's a complete answer. Let me go on. Have you otherwise ever received sexually suggestive or explicit emails from Judge Kozinski, even if you don't remember whether you were on this gag list or not?
So, Senator, let me start with no woman should be subjected to sexual harassment in the workplace. And
Judge Kavanaugh, you already went through all of that, and I will get to your perspective about making sure that women in the judiciary do not get sexual harassed. I just want to ask you, during and after your clerkship with Judge Kozinski, did you ever witness or hear of allegations of any inappropriate behavior or conduct that could be described as sexual harassment by Judge Kozinski?
No, Senator, and there were 10. I worked in Washington D.C. There were 10 judges in the courthouse with him in Pasadena.
So what does that mean?
Prominent
he
federal
didn't do
judges
it?
in the courthouse with him, and we worked side by side with him day after day while he was Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit.
To be clear, while this kind of behavior on the part of Judge Kozinski was going on for 30 years, it was an open secret. You saw nothing, you heard nothing, and you obviously said nothing. Judge Kavanaugh, do you believe the women who recently came forward to accuse Judge Kozinski of this kind of behavior?
I have no reason not to believe him, Senator.
Wow.
So, let me just put this into a context, because you have testified that you basically saw no evidence of this kind of behavior at all. You never heard of it, but you worked closely with them on a number of projects. It wasn't just during the time you were clerking for him. You kept in touch with them while you were in the White House. He introduced you to the Senate at your 2006 nomination hearing, and he called you his good friend. Yesterday, you called each of the people who introduced you a friend, and I presume you felt that way about Judge Kozinski when he introduced you in 2006. You joined him for panels at the Federalist Society, where you patted him on the shoulder and said, I learned from the master about hiring clerks. And
oh, Jesus.
I have a photo of that. Here's Judge Kozinski.
I learned from the master about hiring clerks.
You told us that you have hired many women clerks, how you are a mentor to women, how important you think it is for women to have a safe working environment where they feel that they can report sexual harassment. I conclude that you consider yourself an advocate for women. If a judge was aware that another judge was engaging in sexual harassment or sexual assault, would the judge have a duty to report it?
Had I heard those allegations, Senator, I would have done three things immediately. I would have called Judge Tom Griffith, who's on our court, who's on the Codes of Conduct Committee for the Federal Judiciary appointed by Chief Justice Roberts. I would have called Chief Judge Garland, who's chair of the Executive Committee. I would have called Jim Duff, who's head of the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts. If for any reason I was not satisfied with that. I would have called Chief Justice Roberts directly.
So you believe that all judges who, including yourself, if you ever heard or any allegations about these kinds of behaviors, you would report it. You would go through whatever processes were set up by the courts to prevent this kind of behavior and to hold people accountable. And yet, you know, someone that you've been close to, that you clerked, and I did go through the various encounters, more than encounters, that you had with Judge Kozinski, and yet you heard nothing, saw nothing, and obviously you did not say anything.
Well, here. This guy, Cyrus Sinai, told The Intercept that at least 2 federal employees have information to provide the committee about Judge Kavanaugh, including one who spoke directly to Kavanaugh about Kozinski, about the sexual harassment of the clerks, of the women, of the people that worked with Kozinski, that Kavanaugh was personally told about it. He's testifying that if he had heard about it, he would have done this, I would have done that, and if I wasn't satisfied, I would have gone all the way to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, I would have this. But instead, he's sitting there claiming ignorance. And according to this letter that was delivered to Chuck Grassley and Dianne Feinstein by an attorney who worked in this this office of the judiciary out in the Ninth Circuit, he said, you know, people have told me that they personally told Kavanaugh about Kozinski and what he was doing, and that he just would ignore it, and that apart from interviewing these witnesses, the Judiciary Committee also needs to, quote, subpoena all intra-court emails and messages between Kavanaugh and Kozinski, and all emails to and from Kozinski with links to his website. Because, he said, Kozinski hosted pornography on his website and forced some clerks to view it. And Kavanaugh knew about it. And this went on for 30 years. And finally, this man, this whistleblower, was able to get the Washington Post to write a series of articles and talk to these 15 women who were willing to talk, but nobody wanted to hear what they had to say. And finally, Kozinski had to resign, and now Kozinski's son clerks for Kavanaugh. You see how they're all friends, birds of a feather and all that? They apparently do something with an F together. Yeah, but the fact that Kozinski hosted pornography and made his clerks view it, and that Kavanaugh was responsible for vetting clerks, I mean, and that, there's evidence that there are emails between them. This goes to why this whole thing was rushed. This goes to why you had Bill Burke sit on all these emails. Bill Burke vet all these documents. Bill Burke, who kept so much hidden. The only way these important stories can be told is if Congress stops with these stupid abstract deadlines and faux procedures, because there is no protocol for this, and statements of, oh, well, she's doing this because all this fake news. Oh, she's doing this because her parents lost their house in a foreclosure in Kavanaugh's mother's court. Have you seen that one floating around the internet? Yeah, Laura Ingraham decided that would be tweet-worthy. So she tweeted out some bogus story with some bogus docket that bogusly said that Kavanaugh's mother foreclosed on Dr. Ford's parents' home. Well, a little research clearly shows that that Dr. Ford's parents still own their home, and they were never foreclosed on. So bite me with this fake news. Then they also said, oh, you should look at all her students' reviews. They hate her. They think she's an uptight, this and that, blah, blah, blah. That is not the same Christine Blasey Ford. This is a different woman, a different professor named Christine A. Ford, who is now suing because she didn't ask to be put on Laura Ingraham's Twitter feed and outed as being a tough professor, which is what the students were writing. She's very tough. If you want an easy ride, don't take her class. But if you really want to be, tested and blah, blah, blah. So it was all this fake news about her, all of this. So this man also wrote to the Judiciary Committee in July 24th, and he also mailed copies of this letter to Kamala Harris, to Richard Blumenthal, to Representative Bob Goodlatte of Virginia, to Jim Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin, to Jerry Nadler, who is, the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, to Ted Lieu. Goodlatte is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. That's why he picked these particular House members. But he's not sure that they received them, but he is sure that Feinstein and Grassley received them, because he did get a response from Grassley, and he knows that these were the two that he made sure received the letter. He said, quote, "I spent quite a bit of time trying to get Feinstein to address it." Feinstein was also contacted in July by Miss Dr. Ford, and Ford's letter says, quote, "I am writing with information relevant and evaluating the current nominee to the Supreme Court. As a constituent, I expect that you will maintain this as confidential until we have further opportunity to speak. Brett Kavanaugh physically and sexually assaulted me during high school in the early 1980s. I have received medical treatment regarding the assault. On July 6th, I notified my local government representative, Anna Eshoo, to ask them how to proceed with sharing this information. It is upsetting to discuss sexual assault and its repercussions, yet I feel guilty and compelled as a citizen about the idea of not saying anything. I am available to speak further should you wish to discuss." Then, of course, her name started leaking out. Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer later reported that after dealing with Eshoo and Feinstein's office, Dr. Ford stepped back because she had heard, and this is why there's no difference between what happened 27 years ago and now we have Clarence Thomas sitting on the court, and we know that Clarence Thomas did it. He did it to Anita Hill all these years later. But Ronan Farrow reported, quote, "acted out of a sense that Democrats would be better off focusing on legal rather than personal issues in the questioning of Kavanaugh." Can I just tell some of these female members of the Judiciary Committee, it ain't personal if a guy attempts to rape you. That is not personal business. It is criminal behavior. It is violence against women, and it goes completely and utterly to whether or not he is worthy of this position. This is not personal, okay? Sorry. And then after the interactions with Eshoo and Feinstein's offices, the woman decided not to speak about the matter publicly. She had repeatedly reported the allegation to members of Congress, and watching Kavanaugh move toward what looked like an increasingly assured confirmation, she decided to end her effort to come forward. A source close to the woman said, this is Ronan Farrow's reporting from before, Feinstein's office did not respond for a request for comment. Feinstein's decision to handle the matter in her own office without notifying other members of the Senate Judiciary Committee stirred concern among her Democratic colleagues for several days. Feinstein declined requests from other Democrats on the Judiciary Committee to share the woman's letter and other relevant communications. Now, I will say that Dr. Ford's attorneys, currently she has Lisa Banks and Deborah Katz, they have since said that Feinstein handled it, they as well as she could have, because they say that, obviously Dr. Ford asked for confidentiality and didn't want to press the matter further. She got spooked. She didn't want to do it. And so Feinstein respected that decision, and they believe that Feinstein did well by her. That's their quote. And we do think that people took this decision away from her, but that was wrong. But let's not forget that there are other issues outstanding about Kavanaugh. The emails that came to light during this confirmation hearing clearly show that he was relying on stolen emails that Orrin Hatch's staffer, Manny Miranda, was stealing from the Democrats for 18 months. 4,600 and some odd documents were stolen over a period of 2 years, and Kavanaugh was receiving them. We saw the emails. I saw them. You saw them if you watched this confirmation hearing. We did an entire show about it. We played the testimony from 4 and 6 where he swore he never saw these documents, and then in 18 he goes, oh, everybody does it. You know what I mean? And so here this man, Cyrus Sinai, he also said in this letter that came to them around the same time as Dr. Ford, her letter came to them, Sinai himself in his letter offered to testify. He said, that, he said the appeals court overruled my vexatious litigant designation, said the case, was worthy. And in reversing the trial court's order, they said the appeals court said, we don't signal our approval of the manner in which this litigation has been conducted. It's gone on far too long. It has consumed far too much time of the judicial system's limited resources. Gamesmanship appears too often to take precedence over reasonable efforts to resolve procedural disputes and to address the merits of the remaining controversy. Civility and courtesy are absent. Meanwhile, this guy was right. You see how they all stick together? This is like getting one doctor to testify against another. It doesn't happen. Same thing. You can't find one lawyer to testify against another lawyer. They all stick together. It's just, this is vile. But there are people to call, is the point here. There are definitely people to call, and there are other issues outstanding with Kavanaugh. So here's the update. Her lawyers have responded to Chuck Grassley's "it's now or never," and I need to know by 10 o'clock Friday morning, or else we're gonna. He was actually considering Monday, and he still is, as far as I can see, calling Kavanaugh by himself to disparage this woman, right? To sit there and say, I have no idea who she is, and I don't know what's wrong with her. Just, a little nutty, a little slutty, same thing as Anita Hill. So her lawyers have responded to Chuck Grassley, and they have said, as you are aware, she has been receiving death threats, which have been reported to the FBI. Now, that needs to get investigated, Okay. As you are aware, she's been receiving death threats, which have been reported to the FBI, and she and her family have been forced out of their home. She wishes to testify. There's your answer. She wishes to testify, provided that we can agree on terms that are fair and which ensure her safety. A hearing on Monday is not possible, and the committee's insistence that it occur then is arbitrary. Dr. Ford has asked me to let you know that she appreciates the various options you have suggested. Her strong preference continues to be for the Senate Judiciary Committee to allow for a full investigation prior to her testimony. Wouldn't you want to hear from this guy who has experience with Kavanaugh? Wouldn't you want to hear from other people who are willing to come forward who also worked with Kavanaugh while Kozinski was molesting, these women, and that some of them actually reported it to Kavanaugh? Because that would go to the truthful, the veracity of his truthfulness under oath in that Mazie Hirono clip that I just played. Also, the emails that he received that were stolen. Also, his finances. Nobody asked a single question about his finances in that hearing. It wasn't until the written questions, and he got off scot-free. How did this man have a down payment for a $1.25 million house when clearly his financial disclosures don't show that he had any account that would be able to cover a 20 or 10% down payment on a house at that price? And then what happened with the debt he had? He had anywhere from $60,000 to $200,000 worth of debt on Nationals tickets, he said. It was 3 different credit cards. And then all of a sudden the debt vanished in less than a year on $220,000 a year, which is a healthy living. But it is, and he also belongs to a country club where the initiation fee is $91,000 and then another $9,000 a year every year. Where is all this money coming from? Why is that important? Because it matters where his money's coming from. It matters. And this was exactly the kind of emails that were being stolen from the Democrats when they were looking at the Priscilla Owens confirmation, because she was receiving money from outside groups to be hostile to litigants who came before her pregnant. Right. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.